the overseer's wife. Why she risked everything for a slave. Before sunrise touched the fields, a decision was already moving through the dark. It crept between porch columns and down dirt paths where footsteps learned to soften themselves. On a plantation where rules were iron and mercy was rare, one woman would choose to see what others refused. A wife bound by duty, a young man divided by loyalty, and a girl born into silence. Each carried a secret that could undo them all. This is a tale told in murmurs and lantern glow, where courage hides in small gestures and love dares to breathe. It is the summer of 1851 at Briarwood Estate, where cotton rows stretched like vows no one remembers making. Here live those who command and those who endure. At the heart of this story stand Clara Whitfield, the overseer's wife, Elias Whitfield, the overseer's thoughtful son, and Lena, a young enslaved girl whose quiet resolve unsettles old certainties. Watching from the grand house are Mrs. Beauregard, the master's wife, and her close companion Miss Rowan, a woman whose smile conceals a keen ear. If you enjoy deep, emotional historical stories, please like, subscribe, and support the channel. Briarwood stirred with the morning bell, its sound rolling across the fields like a command learned by heart. Clara Whitfield stood beneath the shade of a magnolia, her posture composed, her thoughts anything but. Marriage had taught her order. Life had taught her to notice what order ignored. In the yard below, Lena carried a basket of linen, her steps measured, her eyes lowered. She moved as if the ground itself required permission. Clara watched the girl pause to steady her breath, then continue. It was a small moment, too small for most, but Clara felt it lodge within her. From the edge of the lane, Elias Whitfield leaned against a fence rail, pretending to read. He had learned figures and schedules, yet his attention strayed to the human cost beneath them. When Lena's basket tipped, he flinched before anyone else noticed. That night, the house hummed with polite voices. Mrs. Beauregard presided, elegant and cold. Miss Rowan listened more than she spoke. In the kitchen, a whisper passed, of an ailment, of a dark salve known to soothe when nothing else would. Clara heard it. And in hearing, she crossed a line she could never step back from. What happened next would change Briarwood forever. Briarwood's days lengthened as summer settled in, and with the heat came a restlessness no breeze could ease. The routines remained, bells, ledgers, measured steps, but beneath them ran a current of unease, as if the land itself sensed a turning. Clara Whitfield found herself lingering where she had no reason to be. She visited the smokehouse twice in a morning. She paused at the well, listening to the quiet exchanges between women whose words carried more meaning than they showed. It was there she heard Lena's cough again, dry, stubborn, trying not to be heard. Clara did not turn at once. She waited, as though waiting might make the sound pass. It did not. That afternoon, Clara sent a message to the kitchen. Nothing remarkable, just a request for cloth and warm water. When Lena arrived at the back porch, she kept her eyes down, hands folded tight. "You may sit," Clara said softly. Lena hesitated, the pause long enough to speak of rules learned early. "Yes, ma'am," she said, and sat on the edge of the step. Clara noticed the girl's hands, chapped, careful, bearing small cuts that never fully healed. "You've been unwell," Clara said, not a question. Lena nodded once. "It comes and goes." Clara reached for the cloth. "Let me see your arm." The sleeve lifted to reveal a swelling near the elbow, tender and warm. Lena stiffened, ready for rebuke. None came. "I know a remedy," Clara said. "A salve." It's old knowledge. Lena's eyes flickered up, then down. "They say such things bring trouble." Clara met her gaze. "Sometimes they bring relief." That night, Clara crossed the narrow hall to a small cabinet she rarely opened. Inside lay a tin wrapped in linen, darkened with age. The salve within was nearly black, its scent sharp and earthy. Clara's mother had taught her once how to apply it, when to wait, when to pray. Clara had never thought she would use it here. She carried the tin wrapped tight, moving through shadows toward the quarters. Elias Whitfield stood near the sycamore, startled to see her. "Mother," he began. "Not now," she said gently. "Walk with me." They did not speak until the quarters were close. Elias's face tightened. "If anyone sees." "They won't," Clara said. "And if they do, we will answer for it." He searched her face, seeing resolve where he had once seen only caution. "I'll keep watch," he said. Inside, Lena sat on her pallet, breath shallow. Clara knelt, her skirts forgotten, and applied the salve with practiced care. Lena hissed once, then relaxed as the ache eased. "It will draw the heat," Clara murmured. "We'll check it tomorrow." Tears welled in Lena's eyes, unbidden. "Thank you," she whispered, as though gratitude itself might be punished. Word traveled anyway, as words always do. Miss Rowan noticed the change first, the way Clara's gaze drifted, the way Elias lingered near the quarters at dusk. Miss Rowan's talent was observation, and she exercised it with patience. Over tea, she remarked lightly, "You've taken an interest in remedies, Clara." Clara smiled. "Old habits." Mrs. Beauregard's eyes sharpened. "Remedies for whom?" "Household matters," Clara said, voice even. Mrs. Beauregard set her cup down with care. "Order is a remedy too." The tension spread. Elias found himself drawn deeper into quiet acts, carrying water at odd hours, sharing a book with Lena's brother through the fence. He spoke to Lena when he could, about small things, the weather, the way the fields changed color at dusk. Their words were careful, but their silences spoke loudly. One evening, as thunder rolled distant, Lena confessed, "I don't want trouble to find her." Elias nodded. "It's already looking," he said. "But we can be careful." Carefulness proved fragile. A field hand collapsed near the south row, fevered and shaking. Mrs. Beauregard demanded the doctor. He came, shook his head, prescribed rest that could not be spared. That night, whispers turned toward the dark cell, toward Clara. Miss Rowan followed a lantern down the path and saw Clara bend near the quarters again. She did not call out. She only remembered. The next morning, Mrs. Beauregard summoned Clara. "You forget your place," she said coolly. "Kindness confuses those who should know better." Clara's hands folded. "Kindness strengthens a household." Mrs. Beauregard's smile did not reach her eyes. "So does obedience." Elias overheard enough to know the ground was shifting. He sought his father, but found only ledgers and closed doors. He returned to the sycamore at dusk, where Lena waited. The swelling reduced, the pain eased. "They're watching," he said. "So am I," Lena replied. "All my life." A storm broke that night, rain lashing roofs and washing footprints away. In the chaos, a fire flared near the barns, small, quickly contained, but enough to stir fear. Accusations rose without proof. Mrs. Beauregard's gaze fixed on the quarters. Miss Rowan spoke softly into that fear. "People grow bold when they think themselves protected." Clara stood between rumor and punishment, her voice steady. "There will be no rash action." Mrs. Beauregard leaned close. "You protect one, you risk many." As the storm passed, Briarwood stood quieter than before. Lines had been drawn, though no one named them. Clara returned the salve to its cabinet, knowing it would not stay there. Elias resolved to learn what help looked like when secrecy failed. Lena listened to the night, counting breaths, aware that relief often comes with a cost. Above them all, the house settled, and the fields waited. What had begun as a remedy was becoming a reckoning, and the reckoning was not far off. The night the truth surfaced, Briarwood held its breath. A moonless sky pressed low over the estate, and the fields lay dark and listening. Lanterns bobbed along the main walk as voices gathered near the big house, quiet at first, then sharpened by suspicion. Mrs. Beauregard stood at the center of it, composed and radiant, her presence commanding stillness. At her side, Miss Rowan held a folded handkerchief, eyes bright with the careful interest of someone who had waited for this moment. The fire near the barns had been blamed on carelessness, but fear needed a face. It found one. "Bring them," Mrs. Beauregard said, her tone silk over steel. They brought Lena first, hands clasped, posture straight despite the tremor in her breath. The swelling on her arm had receded, the skin healing, the pain eased, but the mark of the salve remained faintly dark. Mrs. Beauregard noticed at once. "What is that?" she asked. Lena said nothing. She had learned when silence was safer than truth. Mrs. Beauregard's gaze slid to Clara Whitfield, who stood at the edge of the gathering, pale but upright. "Care to explain, Mrs. Whitfield?" Clara stepped forward. "She was unwell," she said. "I treated her." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Mrs. Beauregard's smile sharpened. "With what?" Clara hesitated only a moment. "A salve. One I trust." Miss Rowan unfolded her handkerchief. "A dark salve," she said lightly. "I've heard of it. Draws sickness out, they say. Also draws ideas." The crowd leaned in. Elias Whitfield pushed through, heart pounding. "This is not right," he said. "She meant no harm." Mrs. Beauregard turned her attention to him. "Meaning is irrelevant," she replied. "Order is everything." A shout rose from the quarters as word spread. Faces appeared at the edges, fearful, hopeful, angry. The air grew heavy, charged with something dangerous. "Enough," Mrs. Beauregard said. "We will have answers." She motioned, and a servant produced a small tin wrapped in linen, the very one Clara had hidden. Miss Rowan had found it. Clara's breath caught. Elias reached for her, stopped himself. The tin was opened, its dark contents revealed under lantern light. The scent rose, unmistakable. Mrs. Beauregard lifted her chin. "You brought this into my house." "I brought relief," Clara said, voice steady though her hands shook. "I brought care where it was denied." "Care breeds defiance," Mrs. Beauregard snapped. "And defiance breeds chaos." A sudden cry cut through the tension. A man staggered forward from the shadows, fevered, eyes glassy, the same field hand who had collapsed days before. He fell to his knees, shaking. "Please," he whispered. "It helps." The crowd stilled. Mrs. Beauregard recoiled, then masked it. "Remove him," she ordered. "No," Elias said, louder now. "Listen to him." Mrs. Beauregard turned, eyes flashing. "You forget yourself." Elias did not back away. "I remember myself," he said, "and what I was taught, that a life is a life." Silence fell, thick and dangerous. Mrs. Beauregard raised a hand. "Then you will share in the consequences." At that moment, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from the crowd. Voices rose in protest, fear breaking into anger. Miss Rowan stepped closer to Mrs. Beauregard, whispering urgently. The master himself appeared on the porch, drawn by the noise, his expression wary. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Mrs. Beauregard spoke quickly, framing the tale. "Disorder, forbidden remedies, influence spreading like fire." Clara listened, then stepped forward again. "I will speak plainly," she said. "If there is blame, let it rest on me. I chose this. I applied the salve. I will answer for it." A hush followed. Elias stared at her, stunned. Lena looked up, tears spilling freely now. The master studied Clara, then the tin, then the crowd. "Does it work?" he asked quietly. The question landed like a stone in water. Mrs. Beauregard stiffened. Miss Rowan's eyes widened. "Yes," Clara said. "It does." The master turned to the fevered man. "Did it help you?" The man nodded weakly. "It did." The master exhaled, long and slow. "Then this ends tonight," he said. "There will be no punishment carried out in anger." Mrs. Beauregard protested, her voice tight. "You undermine authority." "I preserve it," he replied, "by keeping order from becoming cruelty." The crowd dispersed reluctantly, whispers trailing behind them. Lena was released to return to the quarters. Elias remained with Clara on the porch, the lantern light softening the lines of her face. "You risked everything," he said. "So did you," she replied. "And so did she." Miss Rowan watched from the shadows, calculating. The salve was returned to Clara, not as a secret now, but as a responsibility. That night, Briarwood slept uneasily. Lines had been crossed openly, truth spoken aloud. The danger had not passed. It had changed shape, for in saving one life, Clara had challenged a system that did not forgive challenges. And Mrs. Beauregard did not forget. The storm had broken, but its aftermath would test them all. Morning arrived without ceremony, as if Briarwood wished to pretend the night before had been nothing more than a disturbance of air. Dew clung to the grass. Bells rang on time. Yet beneath the familiar sounds lay a tension that would not lift. Clara Whitfield woke knowing the ground under her feet had shifted. The master's words had ended the immediate danger, but they had not erased resentment. She felt it in the stillness of the house, in the way servants avoided her eyes, in the sharp quiet of Mrs. Beauregard, who took her breakfast alone. By mid-morning, Clara was summoned, not by command, but by invitation. Mrs. Beauregard waited in the sitting room, posture immaculate, hands folded as though in prayer. "You embarrassed me," she said without preamble. Clara did not sit. "I acted to prevent harm. You acted to be seen," Mrs. Beauregard replied coolly. "Do not mistake restraint for approval. You will not repeat it." Clara met her gaze. "I cannot promise that." The silence that followed was brittle. Mrs. Beauregard smiled faintly. "Then understand the cost." Outside, Elias found that his usual freedoms had narrowed. His father avoided conversation, the ledgers heavier than before. He was reassigned to the far fields, where oversight left little room for quiet kindness. Still, at dusk, he found ways, brief words, a shared glance, reassurance passed like a secret. Lena healed. The swelling faded, strength returned, and with it, a wary hope. She carried herself differently now, not bolder, but steadier. Others noticed. Some thanked her with their eyes. Others warned her to be careful. The salve became a subject of whispered debate. Clara kept it locked away, using it sparingly, openly when permitted, discreetly when not. The master allowed it under conditions: supervision, records, restraint. Mrs. Beauregard watched each use like a hawk. Miss Rowan lingered near Clara more often, her questions gentle, her interest unsettling. "You've made yourself necessary," she observed one afternoon. "I've made myself useful," Clara replied. "Those are not the same," Miss Rowan said, smiling. Trouble returned in smaller forms. A reprimand here, a reassignment there. Rules tightened. The house sought to reassert its shape. Yet the memory of the night, the master's question, the man's relief, could not be erased. It lived on in glances and in the courage of speaking up when illness struck again. When another fever spread, Clara insisted on care. Elias argued for rest. Together, they pressed, and this time, the master listened sooner. Lives were spared quietly, without spectacle. Mrs. Beauregard's influence waned just enough to be felt. She turned her attention outward, hosting visitors, projecting control. Miss Rowan traveled briefly, returning with news and knowing looks. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Elias met Lena by the sycamore. "It won't be easy," he said. "It never was," she replied. "But it's different now." "Yes," he said, "it is." Above them, Briarwood settled into a new, uneasy balance, one that could tip again at any moment. The crisis had passed, but its consequences were unfolding, reshaping lives in ways no one could fully see. And in that reshaping, the future waited. Autumn arrived at Briarwood with a gentler heat, the fields turning from green to gold as if the land itself were learning a softer way to breathe. Change came like that, slowly, then all at once. The master's decision to permit supervised care had altered the rhythm of the estate. It did not undo the past, nor did it free those bound by it, but it shifted the daily weight. Illness was no longer ignored until it became spectacle. Work pauses were granted, briefly, begrudgingly, yet they were granted. And at the center of it all stood Clara Whitfield, measured and steady, refusing both praise and retreat. Mrs. Beauregard withdrew into formality. She hosted dinners with impeccable grace, spoke of order and tradition, and never once mentioned the salve. But her eyes followed Clara with a cool calculation. And when Miss Rowan returned from town with news of neighboring estates adopting similar practices, Mrs. Beauregard's composure thinned. "Imitation," she said sharply one evening. "It spreads." "Care spreads," Clara replied. "So does trust." Mrs. Beauregard rose, signaling the end of the conversation. "Trust is a luxury," she said. "One you will find expensive." Meanwhile, Elias discovered his voice. He petitioned his father with facts, fewer lost workdays, steadier yields, calmer quarters. He spoke without accusation, learned to listen as much as he argued. It did not make him powerful, but it made him heard. His father began to consult him, reluctantly at first, then with growing respect. Lena became a quiet anchor in the quarters. Others came to her, not because she had answers, but because she had endured. She shared what she knew: how to soothe a fever with patience, how to speak carefully, how to hope without inviting punishment. When Clara asked her to assist openly with care, Lena agreed, her hands steady, her eyes clear. "You don't have to," Clara told her. "I want to," Lena replied. "For them. And for me." The work bound them, not as equals, not as friends in the simple sense, but as collaborators in a fragile good. Elias watched from a distance, pride and worry intertwined. He and Lena spoke when they could, their words cautious, their silences heavy with what could not be said aloud. They learned the art of presence, standing near without touching, sharing a look without promise. Miss Rowan made her move with subtlety. She approached the master with suggestions framed as efficiencies, not ethics. She praised Clara's diligence publicly, questioned it privately. When that failed, she shifted, befriending Mrs. Beauregard more closely, offering sympathy sharpened by strategy. "They will remember this as weakness," Miss Rowan murmured one afternoon. "They will remember it as survival," Mrs. Beauregard replied, though doubt flickered. Winter crept in early, and with it came scarcity. The test was not sickness now, but hunger and cold. Clara organized distributions, rationed fairly, argued for repairs. Elias oversaw shelters reinforced against the wind. Lena coordinated quietly, ensuring no one was forgotten. The master noticed. "You've made this place steadier," he said to Clara one night. "People are steadier when they're seen," she answered. Mrs. Beauregard listened from the doorway, her face unreadable. The season turned again. Spring returned with rain, and the fields answered. With growth came visitors, neighbors curious, cautious, watching. Briarwood was spoken of differently now, not as kind, not as just, but as changing. The word carried risk. Miss Rowan departed at last, her influence spent. She left behind a polite letter and no regrets. Mrs. Beauregard remained, quieter, her authority intact but altered. She and Clara found a truce, uneasy, unspoken, maintained by shared interest rather than affection. One evening, beneath the blooming dogwood, Elias spoke plainly to Lena. "I don't know what the future holds," he said, "but I know what I'll stand for." Lena nodded. "That's more than most," she said. They stood together, the distance between them both real and bridged by resolve. Briarwood did not become something else overnight, but it leaned, just slightly, toward mercy. And in that lean, lives found room to breathe. Years later, when people spoke of Briarwood, they spoke carefully. Memory had softened some edges and sharpened others, as it always does. But one truth remained. The place had been changed by a choice made quietly, at night, with a small tin wrapped in linen. The seasons continued their steady turning. Cotton still grew. Bells still rang. Yet the silences were no longer the same. Clara Whitfield aged into her resolve. The lines at the corners of her eyes deepened, earned by worry and watchfulness rather than regret. She became known, not beyond the county, not in history books, but among those who lived and worked the land, as someone who listened first. She never claimed credit. When asked why she had risked so much, she answered simply, because it needed doing. Her marriage endured, reshaped by honesty and fatigue. The overseer learned that authority held better when it bent. He spoke less, observed more. When he passed, years later, Clara kept the ledgers for a time, then handed them to steadier hands. She kept the salve locked away, using it when needed, teaching its careful use to those who would respect it. Elias Whitfield did not remain the overseer's son forever. He left Briarwood to study, returned with broader shoulders and a quieter confidence. He brought back books and ideas and an understanding of how change could be argued for without burning everything in its path. He married late, if at all. People told different versions of that story, but he was known for fairness and for remembering names. He never forgot the sycamore, nor the lessons learned beneath it. He stood firm when he could, stepped aside when he must, and chose his battles with care. When asked what had shaped him, he spoke of a night when truth was allowed to stand in the open. Lena's life unfolded with patience. She endured losses and gathered small victories. She became a healer in practice, if not in title, her hands steady, her presence calming. People sought her counsel because she told the truth without cruelty. She never forgot who she had been, nor did she allow others to forget. When freedom came, as it did in time and in stages, she met it with a steady gaze, ready for the work it required. She left Briarwood when she chose, not when she was pushed. She carried with her the knowledge learned there, the cost of silence, the power of care, the danger and necessity of hope. In later years, when children asked her how things had begun to change, she told them about a woman who knelt and listened. Mrs. Beauregard lived long enough to see the world tilt in ways she had not expected. She remained a figure of polish and restraint, her authority intact within the walls she guarded. Yet even she adjusted, quietly. She did not apologize. She did not praise. She adapted. In private moments, she watched from windows and wondered when order had become something else, and whether it had always been so fragile. Of Miss Rowan, stories diverged. Some said she prospered elsewhere, her talents better suited to places that rewarded sharp observation. Others said she faded into ordinary life, her moment passed. What mattered was that Briarwood learned to recognize the difference between counsel and manipulation. The salve's tin grew lighter with use, then was refilled, again and again. Knowledge passed hand to hand, softened by care and caution. It was never a miracle. It did not fix everything, but it became a symbol of something harder to name: the willingness to act when action was dangerous. On quiet evenings, when the lights slanted just right across the fields, Clara would walk the paths and remember. She remembered the fear, the courage, the faces lit by lanterns. She remembered standing alone and discovering she was not. Briarwood did not become a place of legends. It became something rarer, a place where small mercies accumulated, where change arrived not with thunder, but with footsteps softened by respect. And so the story closes not with triumph, but with endurance, with the understanding that history often turns on choices made out of sight, by people who never expected to be remembered. They were remembered anyway, by the lives they touched, by the silences they broke, and by the quiet truth that one act of care can bend the course of many. This was why the overseer's wife risked everything.